Hey everyone, and thank you for joining the 41st week of the Free Assange Vigil. Just so everybody knows, we will be streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, or as close to it as we can get. And then Sundays or Saturdays, we'll be streaming at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and that's United States time. Um, but for the days, we have 34 days until the start of the second round of Julian Assange's extradition hearing. We have 3,416 days since the illegal and arbitrary detention of the WikiLeaks founder started in the Ecuadorian Embassy. It has been 368 days since Julian Assange was trafficked to Belmarsh Prison following a $4.2 billion international monetary loan to the nation of Ecuador. And it has been 40 days since Chelsea Manning was released from federal custody. And it is day 1052 since Reality Winner was taken into federal custody. With us this evening, we have Jose Riviera. He is an activist and journalist from Ecuador. How are you doing today, Jose?
Oh, hi there. How is everybody?
Doing good over here. How are you, Steve?
I'm hanging in there, man. I am experiencing the ridiculousness of a city and county gripped in fear porn and propaganda, but other than that, hanging in there.
About typical. So I guess to start out, Jose, how is Ecuador coping with the coronavirus? Is that
terrible, real terrible. Well, as you have seen on the news, and now it's international news, that the coronavirus has killed a lot of people in Ecuador, especially started in the main port city of Guayaquil. And the main is just a result of, neoliberal policies, by dictator Lenin Moreno, who started obeying orders, from the IMF from the beginning. So he began to dismantle the government, the government health system that Rafael Correa left in the government before, new hospitals and everything. Began to cut funding and everything. So Lenin Moreno began from first day, began his attacks and using the justice system against Rafael Correa's followers, and so he forgot about the administration of government. So here we have the pandemic that we all knew it was coming, but Lenin Moreno apparently did not care or just let it go, let people die. So the first thing he did when after the first or second week that the pandemic began in that city, he just said, I'm going off for 40 days. I'm just going to disappear. And he went on vacation. He's right now, someone told me that he's in the Galapagos Island. So he shows up only when he makes a national, message on TV. And then the rest of the time, we never see him.
So he's basically an absentee president?
Exactly. This strategy, he began using this strategy back in 2018, when he began to delegate, give other government officials presidential duties. So what he's trying to do really is, if when I finish my presidency, no one is going to do anything to me because I didn't do anything. the other guys did it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's laying the groundwork for both plausible deniability and
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
that's you know what? The more I learn about Lenny Moreno, the more appalled I am, and I know that much of his presidency is due to the overwhelming influence that actors within the State Department and the U.S. intelligence community played in getting him elected.
Yes. Well, you know, most people don't know that we have a finance minister, but he's actually he's just you know, he's just an image to say that we have a finance minister. But actually, the IMF is the one that is you know, running the economic policy of Ecuador. And
yeah. The last time we had talked, actually, I believe it
yes,
was during the riots that were happening in
yes,
Ecuador.
yes,
And it was, if I remember properly, the civilian resistance had pushed the government out of the capital and into a military base. If I'm remembering that
yes.
properly.
Right. He
Um,
went to, yeah, he went to the south and to the same city that is right now having so many dead.
could you talk a little bit about what has happened with those protests leading up to COVID, and then if there's something going on with them now?
Well, the protests ended after he eliminated the you know the decree to raise the gas prices. So that's it ended there. But he has begun. He has um, you know doing sending to the National Assembly other economic laws that that will hurt the Ecuadorian people, especially labor laws and things like that. Bankers have been given a lot of money, Ecuadorian money. So, um, so all this, uh, he never ruled against. He has not ruled, you know, for the people of Ecuador, but the elites. And the and after the protest, to dismantle the our you know health system, our labor laws, our lives, and you know learning as to the 19th century, you know, where slavery it's legal. Basically, that's what it amounts to, and the military are back, like you know in the 50s, you know, Monroe Doctrine, you know. So we are back to those times again. So this pandemic has damaged more of his image, of Lenin Moreno's image, because before he was like 10% of acceptance rating on the polls. Right now he's at 0. So, but he doesn't care because the media, the national media, the Ecuadorian media, and the international media, you know, never criticize him. If you notice, all the articles that I have read on the international media about the many people dead because of the pandemic, they never say it is Lenin Moreno's fault,
And actually,
or this dead are dying every day more and more because of the government's you know bad response to the pandemic. They never say that.
there's an article that came out in Mint Press News yesterday. Let me pull that up on screen here real quick. Um, and it is titled Bodies in the Streets. IMF imposed measures have left Ecuador unable to cope with the coronavirus.
Yes.
Do you want to pick this one up, Steve?
Sure. If you are using one of the many coronavirus incidence trackers, the Pacific country of Ecuador does not seem to be particularly badly affected by COVID-19. Officially, the country has less than 7,500 cases and 333 deaths. But everyone knows this number is nonsense, including President Lenin Moreno, who freely admitted that authorities were collecting over 100 dead bodies a day from Guayaquil City alone. I'm sure I murdered that, and I apologize. The epicenter of the pandemic tormenting this country. Ecuador's limited state has essentially collapsed under the strain of COVID-19, with dozens of videos circulating showing dead bodies left in the streets with no one to collect them. The country has already run out of coffins, so corpses are buried in cardboard boxes or simply left in trucking containers. A recent credible estimate based on data gleaned from cemeteries and funeral homes puts Guayaquil's death toll at 7,600, almost that of New York, a city 4 times its size. Thus, more people have died from the virus in the last week than China's cumulative total since November. Jose, can you corroborate that?
Yes. That's true. There are about 150 people dying per day on that city alone, and and they are putting the bodies. You have to hear this very well. They are putting bodies on unrefrigerated containers that were placed on hospitals, outside on the parking lots of the hospitals. So when the containers are full, those containers are picked up and they are already leaking fluids from the dead. And the containers drive through the whole city, leaking all these liquids to the mass grave that they built outside of Guayaquil.
So to jump back in here, let me pop this back up. The article continues later on. And this is something you actually touched on earlier. I think it was before the stream though. Since his election in 2017, President Moreno has made a priority of attacking the relatively generous welfare state measures adopted by his predecessor, Rafael Correa. Moreno had been Correa's vice president and campaigned on a ticket of extending and deepening Correa's democratic socialist agenda. However, most immediately after he took office, he began undoing his work. In 2019, on orders from Washington-based International Monetary Fund, he slashed the country's health budget by a staggering 36%. Moreno also rescinded Ecuador's support for the Australian publisher Julian Assange and was promptly awarded a $4.2 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. Could you talk a little bit about that situation as well, about the way that he's taken office and kind of what has happened to Rafael Correa in the last, I guess 2 weeks at this point?
Yes, Rafael Correa was just, the courts, all the courts in Ecuador, all the judges in Ecuador have not been working for a month. And they met especially to make a jail sentence against Rafael Correa. They just met for that about a week ago. They just met for that only. And no evidence whatsoever, And they sentenced him to 8 years in prison and 25 years. They blocked him 25 years from participating in Ecuadorian politics.
Is that a decision that they had made at the governmental level, like to disallow him from being involved in politics, or is that some kind of law because of the charges?
No, it's the court, the national court had a special meeting about a week ago, just for Rafael Correa.
Because if I remember right, he only served half of his possible terms that he could serve. Is that right? That he
Yes, he was actually in power for 10 years. What happens in Ecuador, a president can be in office for 4 years. But when he came into office, he called for a national assembly to write a new constitution. So that erased all the constitution. The old constitution was no longer, being used. So with a new constitution, he ran again for president, 4 more years. That's what happened. And so he's the best president Ecuador has ever had. And
Has
if
there
he had
been
not,
any blowback in Ecuador for Moreno being the cutout between UC Global and the Trump administration in terms of allowing the rampant spying that was going on at the embassy?
yes, Moreno knew all this information because you see, who is running the show here in Ecuador is the United States. From day one that he came to be president. So Lenin Moreno gave the permission to the London police to violate our sovereignty in London at the London Embassy, which has never happened in the whole history of Ecuador. It's really, Lenin Moreno is an evil man.
God, that's freaking crazy. To circle back to that Mint Press article, I got a couple of follow-up questions. Because there's to close it out, it says the coronavirus was not an uncontrollable act of God. Governmental response to the crisis, however, is not. The Moreno administration's decisions, both before and during the pandemic, are the prime factor in why Ecuador might be the world epicenter of the virus. It has been an unmitigated disaster for the population, but given his close ties to Washington, it is far from clear whether Lenin Moreno cares at all about that. And you're saying there's no like the Ecuadorian people aren't necessarily pointing fingers at Moreno for this, or like what's the overall sentiment there?
Well, the Ecuadorian, as I have said before, the Moreno was a few months ago, like about 8% on acceptance polls, and right now he's at 0. So he has no backing from the Ecuadorian people. Right now, he is the most hated man in Ecuador. And another thing that I don't know if you remember, the media put out about a payment to the IMF for $325 million that they made, I think it was last week. Those $325 million were needed badly here in Ecuador to pay for the response, the health response against the pandemic, and they just paid it. They didn't care, they didn't care. They just paid it just to look good, to the IMF. And the worst thing is that those $325 million actually are for payment of a bond that would be due in 2028. But what happens? I think it was for $1 billion that the Ecuadorian government created government bonds and sold them on the market. That, it was dollar per dollar. You see the value at the beginning. Right now, that bond is only worth 21 cents. So you can imagine the great loss that we've had, it's just the government bonds basically, are worth almost 0 cents, By the time this ends, those bonds will be junk because they're almost junk now. And so the whole Ecuadorian people saw that, and so that's why everybody's criticizing them, and they have begun to arrest, high-profile social media persons.
With Correa being barred from politics for 25 years, and obviously going through his arrest and whatnot, we don't want to belabor that point too much, but is there an opposition that is becoming popularized to Moreno? Is there someone who's more people oriented and less manipulated by the US and the UK who's rising to the challenge right now?
Well, right now the people basically have 3 enemies in the government, the police, the military, and the U.S. government.
That's a formidable list of people to be stacked up against you. I mean,
right.
We see that. We see that play out on an international level.
I actually have a video I want to pull up here for everybody to watch in a tweet real quick. Let me get my screen share up with sound. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, but it is talking about what's happening in Ecuador right now. And I just wanted to go over this because it's showing the situation with the bodies, just to put it kind of in perspective for everyone for what Jose was talking about.
Llevarse el cuerpo de aquí, que hay que esperar un día más todavía con el cuerpo aquí abandonado en la vereda, que no hay ambulancias disponibles en todo Guayaquil para que puedan retirar el cuerpo de aquí. No hay ambulancias. Uno no se puede morir ahora, porque esto es lo que va a pasar.
¡Llévenselo! Hay que bajar, si no se muere. ¡No permitan que lo bajen! ¡Llévenselo! Mire cómo los policías en este momento están bajando un cadáver a la fuerza y van botando en la calle. Mire, Dios mío lindo, cómo lo... ¡Oiga, llévense eso! ¡Oiga, llévense eso! ¿Qué pasó? ¿Por qué dejan eso ahí? Dios mío lindo, miren, Dios mío lindo, cómo dejaron ese muerto ahí.
Hemos tomado la decisión de enterrarlo cerca de la casa de nosotros, lo estamos enterrando.
Aquí hay un muerto, con mueble y todo, ahí lo han dejado.
Eso no va a aguantar, eso no aguanta ni siquiera el peso del muerto te va a aguantar. Si la caja que está ahí, que vino botando líquido, la pusieron ahorita y la caja de cartón se abrió, de un lado está abierta.
Y hemos visto imágenes que nunca debieron haber sucedido. Y por ello, como su servidor público, les pido disculpas.
Would you say that that's an accurate representation of what's going on out there? Like, can you collaborate? Like you already kind of did, but is that what you're seeing out there in Ecuador right now?
Yes, and in fact, it's getting worse. I just learned tonight that the city where I used to live, which is about 3 hours from the capital, Quito, has begun to have a lot of dead people there. It's really terrible. It's really terrible. I have been under curfew for a month already. So as you can imagine, I kind of feel a little bit about what Assange is going through. And I understand, you know, we cannot sleep at night. Well, it's just terrible. So anyway, I would like to send a message to Estela, Assange's fiance, that the Ecuadorian people is with Assange. We have not forgotten you. And our party is the biggest political party in Ecuador, and we are all with Assange.
Because
yes, we hope that he is freed soon.
on the 11th, we saw the passing of the 1-year date of when Julian had been taken into Belmarsh Prison from the Ecuadorian Embassy.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about what that day means to you and how everything that has happened leading up to that and then that day and what's transpired since has kind of affected you and your perspective on the world?
Well, you know, I've been in the political fight for many years, and I tell you, things have gotten worse by the year. They have gotten worse by the year. It's, you know, it almost feels like we've returned back to Hitler times, you know. And the day when they kidnapped Assange from the embassy, all our party and the Ecuadorian people were in shock, you know, that this was happening in our embassy. And so a lot of people cried, and it was a very sad day for Ecuadorians. So, Ms. Estela, know that we were sad that day, the whole Ecuadorian people. We feel for Assange, and we wish he is freed, because he is in danger at the Belmarsh Prison, you know, from contracting the COVID-19 virus. I tweeted with a map that I did with all the parts of London, and Belmarsh Prison is surrounded, you know, by the whole London is just full of COVID-19 people, you know, so he is really in terrible danger. I mean, oh my God, he is in real terrible danger. And I just don't trust the UK authorities, because I just read a tweet on WikiLeaks that in the UK there have died quite a few prisoners, and most of the jail staff is isolated, self-isolating. So you can imagine the danger that Assange is under now.
Yeah, that's something that we're gonna touch on a little bit later in the vigil tonight, especially because Julian had called his friend Von Smith and kind of laid out what was going on. But what we do know is there's at least 2 people that have died in Belmarsh from COVID. There are over 100 personnel that have self-quarantined because they thought they may or may not have been in contact with the virus, and that prisons in general are just a petri dish of various diseases. You're required to get a tuberculosis shot after or at least a lot of states require you to get a tuberculosis shot or a tuberculosis test when you've been to jail. Staph is rampant. There's a bunch of it, like all kinds of diseases are around and alive in jails, and it doesn't matter if you've got if you're over capacity like American jails are, or if you have a, I guess, manageable number of incarcerated people. It's the kind of environment that breeds the spreading of disease. Judge Barraster has been particularly indifferent to this suffering, and it's an indifference that is opportunistic to the ruling class, to the predator class of both the UK and the US, and it's just it's disgusting.
Yes, well, I had tweeted like about 3 months ago that the person who set up the meeting to surrender Assange, when a few days before Lenín Moreno took office, has been awarded right now being the ambassador to the United States in Washington. It's a lady who was involved in the meeting that Paul Manafort had with Lenín Moreno about almost 2 weeks before he began his presidential term. So there you have it. It was all a conspiracy against Assange. And we should not be surprised, because the whole media was always, giving a negative image to Assange in the press. So I hope Assange comes out well, out of this pandemic.
And it's something too that even in the bail hearing, it more or less turned into an extortion hearing where they said, in so many words, if you want bail, we're going to release the names of your partner and your 2 children. And the judge pretty much almost said that the pandemic's not bad enough yet for me to have the ability to do this, and it's up to the National Health Service on how prisoners are going to be released. And then fast forward a little bit, and about 4,000 people as of last week had been released from prisons all across the United Kingdom because of the COVID-19 outbreak, that were like nonviolent, had a little bit of term left on their prison sentence. They had been released. And Julian Assange, his release was denied because of the fact that he hadn't been found guilty of anything, that he was in there essentially just waiting the show trial of an extradition hearing, which, as far as this date, hasn't even been postponed yet. So fast forward a little bit more, then his wonderful fiance came out and did basically a 11-minute video saying, hey, this is who I am. this is the family that we have, this was the circumstance and the situation, basically having her hand forced to reveal herself to the public. And to me, it's kind of in hopes that Julian can get bail or would have a better chance of getting bail now that that argument is off the table of allowing reporters to use her name. Do you have any thoughts about that and how you've kind of seen that unfold in the last 2 or 3 weeks now?
Well, this is what's going on with the courts. It's basically a media show, to say, oh, well, he got his chance in court and he lost the case. Because that's what they did here in the Ecuador, in the court hearings, for Assange. Remember when the protocol was imposed on him? It was just a media show. The Ecuadorian lawyers for Assange and even Baltasar Garzón came to Ecuador. And they just went to a court that already had taken a decision. You understand what I'm saying? So as far as my opinion is concerned, this is just a show that the UK government is doing, So to say, he had his chance in court and he lost. That's my opinion.
I want to say real quick on the subject of Stella Morris that it is incredibly just a gross violation what's happened here. Because here's the thing, the intelligence agencies already knew who she was. The judge knew who she was. The defense team knew who she was. Everybody, all of the players in the process knew who she was, and the point was to, as Andrew said, dangle the exposure of her over Julian's head, and for her to have to reach out to what was it, the Daily Mail, I believe was the outlet she gave the interview to. For her to have to do that as a way to reclaim a small amount of power back and try to get out in front of what was being done to Julian through her and their children is just fucking gross. I'll be forever pissed about that. I will.
Well, if what she did, as far as I'm concerned, is illegal in any court in any part of the world to reveal a private person's name. Stella had nothing to do with the case. Her name is not even, I'm sure her name is not even in any legal documents that Assange lawyers have presented. So, this evil judge in Bereitzer, she just, basically, I took it as a threat, against Stella and the two children. Basically, it's a threat. It's basically a threat, and that is illegal. That is illegal.
Well, if there's one thing that the ongoing persecution of Julian Assange has taught us, it's that the predator class and the court systems that are, ran by them have no regard for rule of law. This case encapsulates the complete erosion of rule of law. Ava Jolly, former Minister of Parliament, remarked on this just over the weekend, and I'm a little bit heartened by the fact that more people that have been in positions of perceived power are coming around to this realization and starting to become more vocal about it, because it doesn't carry the same weight when it's, a scruffy hillbilly or a semi-bespoke Andrew saying it, because we're not in those positions of perceived power. Are there any higher profile people in Ecuador? I obviously Rafael Correa was one, but are there people in positions of perceived power who are speaking out about this in Ecuador?
Well, you must know that most of our party's leaders are either in jail or have to be gone out of the country, exiled. So all of them have always spoken in favor of Assange. But it's not just in Ecuador. All progressive leaders in Latin America support Assange. And they have said so several times. So, you know, it's a question of who has the power now. And the right wing has the power. And the right wing in Ecuador, it's been, you know, directed by the United States government.
Yeah, because we've seen, and I can't remember his name, but the current president in Mexico, as well as
Lopez
Lula
Obrador.
down in Brazil. Has there been any other leaders that have spoken out in favor of Julian? Obviously, Rafael Correa as well.
Well, you must realize that that right now the pandemic has taken all the media attention. So each of those progressive leaders in Latin America right now are concentrated on the pandemic. But before, they have spoken in favor of Assange, you know. So Assange has support. Assange has support in the progressives of Latin America, no question about it. And you know, progressive around the world too, you know, they support him. So you know, as I said, you know, we are living, you know, real dangerous times now, because most of the world is basically being run like a prison. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. We have the majority of the world at this point has been put into lockdown.
Yes.
There's actually been protests here in Ohio and across the country trying to lift this lockdown ban this lockdown order, the quarantine that's been going on. Because and I'm going to repeat this a million times, there was a saying that they aren't necessarily after Julian Assange, that they're after us, and he just stood in their way.
Right.
And this situation with not inherently the coronavirus, but with the response to it by governments around the world really just shows that's been true, that it's never been more real and in people's faces until now. And there's actually groups organizing across Ohio, across Michigan, and so many other places here in the States fighting back against these quarantines. And Ron Paul, actually, if you look up the Ron Paul Liberty Report, did a really good piece on that today, where he showed protests from multiple different states across the country. And there's even a governor here in Michigan, which is a stone's throw north from me, that has banned the purchase of seeds, has banned the purchase of gardening equipment, even though the stores have them and can still get them shipped there. She's banned leaving your house. Her name's Gretchen Whitmer. She's banned leaving your house for anything except essential travel to the grocery store or essential work, and has literally turned Michigan into a police state, where she was going as far as to revoking the licenses of doctors and pharmacists for prescribing and supplying hydrochloroquine, which is an anti-malaria drug that has, in some tests in combination with other drugs, been shown effective against early stage coronavirus symptoms. And I think it was 40 out of 40 French patients that were treated in a study with HCQ and azithromycin were cured. And not to say that that's going to be the same across the entire population of the world, but for doctors to literally be left to their own devices to try to figure out how to treat people and then have a semi-effective treatment have those doctors lose their licensing to practice medicine because they prescribed a medicine that in combination with another one had been shown to be relatively effective is just crazy. Do you see anything like that happening out in Ecuador where it's kind of escalated into a more police state-like situation?
Can you please repeat the last part? The sound broke up.
Yeah, have you seen anything like that out in Ecuador where it's kind of spiraled into more of a police state kind of situation than a response to a medical issue?
Well, yes, we have a police state. We've been under curfew for more than a month already. And they, in Ecuador, the curfew starts at 2 p.m. until 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. And during the day, during those from 6 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the license plates have a special day, you know. Even numbers can use the car in, you know, on a certain day. That's how it's working here. But for example, if they find you breaking the curfew, they take you to jail. And if you have money, you won't go to jail. You pay them off and you go home free, you know. That's the way it works here.
So I would like to thank you very much for joining us tonight, Jose.
Okay.
Do you have any final thoughts, and could you tell people where they can find you at on social media and across the internet?
Well, at in Twitter, that's the only social media account I have. And right now at Sígueme Ecuador, you know, and Unity for J, I'm also always tweeting about events. And right now I'm going to have to, due to the recent arrests of social media protesters, I'm going to have to be very careful because I may end up in jail. And you know what the accusation that they are using now? Illegal association. That's what they are accusing everybody.
How do they define illegal association?
According to, yes, right. According to the law in any country, illegal association is when you commit a crime when you are associated to someone, you know, something illegal. But you see, the judges are corrupt and they do what the government wants. So they think they're going to silence us, and they're not going to be able to do it because there are too many of us. So
well, from the bottom of my heart, my friend, you keep your head down and
yes.
You stay out of trouble, and you come back and you tell us what's going on.
Right.
Please.
Exactly. I'll do my best.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much, Jose Rivera. We're always stoked to have him on. He does take a considerable personal risk in order to do what he does, and then to come on and tell us about it. So we're very, very grateful for that. What did you have in mind, Andrew, for the first story that we're covering?
We had talked about it briefly. So I would like to talk about the phone call that Julian had with, I can't remember the gentleman's name.
Juan Smith.
Yes. So I'm going to get that pulled up on screen. Okay, it's the express.co.uk article.
Okay.
Julian Assange's terror within fairly functioning.
Take care, Jose.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jose.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So, do we want to, we're not going to roll any of the, are we going to roll the video? We didn't actually talk about this. This is our pre-production meeting as well as our live streaming pre-Assange vigil. It is kind of funny because occasionally we will get people who are paid to smear us, and one of the accusations is that we're reading off of a script, and I hope that you all know and that you can, you know, tell that we don't script any of this stuff. Clearly. So let's go to the article. Julian Assange has described chaos and misery within Britain's maximum security Belmarsh Prison, where coronavirus has infected many inmates. Mr. Assange explained to a friend that Belmarsh Prison, where he's detained, is barely functioning. He added the virus is ripping through the prison. British freelance video journalist Vaughn Smith has revealed in a Facebook post after talking with Assange by phone that as many as 150 prison staff members have been forced into self-isolation as they may have contracted the virus. Mr. Smith said, quote, the prison admitted in mid-March that the disease already reached its premises. They even reported one coronavirus-linked inmate death. The WikiLeaks founder has spent almost 24 hours alone, has to spend almost 24 hours alone in his cell. Belmarsh is a maximum security prison where there are many inmates convicted of terrorism, which, of course, when they go to court, they don't have to sit in the human cage, but Julian Assange has to sit in the human cage. Steps to limit the spread of the disease within the prison have been taken. Prisoners are now not allowed to be in contact with each other except during exercise, which seems kind of counterproductive, but that's editorializing. The measure to limit any contact is in order to stem the spread of the disease. Mr. Assange and other inmates still spend half an hour in exercise per day. The latest Ministry of Justice figures show 3 deaths and a 20% increase in cases of the virus to 107 prisoners across 38 prisons and 19 staff across 12 prisons. Now, you would think, Andrew, that would come into consideration when a magistrate or a judge has to rule on whether or not someone gets to leave their, leave their cell with an ankle bracelet on. In Julian Assange's case, the decisions aren't being guided by what precedent or the law says. They're being dictated by the U.S. State Department.
Oh, yeah. And you see it with the judge coming literally just out with pre-prepared statements, even in situations where all of the arguments were presented verbally. Where she walks out, she'll listen to them talk, and then she'll pick up her piece of paper, she'll read it, and act like she did a good job as a judge. And it's symbolic at this point because it's the function that you see all the way from traffic courts to the civil cases in the United States to drug offenses, and now it's that same literally just political theater of no, you're going to be found guilty, but how guilty are you going to be, passed up to literally the highest levels of government at this point.
Oh no, we've spoken a number of times on the vigil here about how this is just a show trial, how this appears to be just a formality. It's which sucks because Julian Assange has one of the better legal teams on the planet, and the arguments that they're making and what is contained in the briefs and appeals that they're filing should be considered to be legitimate points and should be considered, by any unbought judge. But we know that it's a top-down situation where even the supervisory magistrate her husband and son are both mentioned in several WikiLeaks documents on a number of different matters.
And if we
Again,
could actually pull that
erosion of the
article
rule
up,
of law.
because we have a pretty well written article about that, and we've talked about it in many occasions too, but just to kind of drive that point home for people, that the presiding judge over this case has literally connections to the intelligence community and to the military that have come out in WikiLeaks publications. Do we have that up, Josh? Yeah, so it starts, the husband of Lady Emma Abernath, the Westminster Chief Magistrate overseeing WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's extradition hearing to the United States, has financial links to the British military establishment, including institutions and individuals exposed by WikiLeaks. It can also be revealed that Lady Abernath has received gifts and hospitality in relation to her husband, including from a military and cybersecurity company exposed by WikiLeaks. These activities indicate that the chief magistrate's activities cannot be considered as entirely separate from her husband's. Lord Abernath of some fancy city, a former defense minister, is a paid chair on the advisory board of the military corporation Thales Group, and was until earlier this year an advisor to the arms company Babcock International. Both companies have had major contracts with the UK Ministry of Defence. The revelations highlight concerns about the conflicts of interest. Lady Abernath began presiding over Assange's legal case in 2017 and ruled this June that a full hearing should begin next February to consider the requests for the extradition from the UK made by the Trump administration. Both judges are required to declare any potential conflicts of interest to the court, but it is our understanding that Lady Abernath has not done so. And so that's the level of corruption in this court case, and that's the British justice that people are so proud to hold up. Literally, we're watching in real time as any sense of justice, as any sense of the rule of law is just absolutely destroyed. And the simple fact that she is ruling above Barrister at this point, like she is the judge that's still overseeing, she never stepped down. They just put up a new public face to the show trial. And it's disgusting that it's allowed to happen, quite simply. But the fact that it's someone that's connected to the WikiLeaks releases makes it seem like more of a personal vendetta than it does trying to get any actual sense of justice or any true ruling over this extradition hearing.
Yeah, it's a grudge judge, which is like the worst possible judge you could have if you were going to court. Look, even if it's a supervisory or guidance role, she's the top magistrate overseeing this entire process. Her prejudice is going to find its way, and you see that with, as you were mentioning, the prepared statements that Vanessa Barrister has. You see it with the sneering condescension that she gives towards Julian Assange and his legal team, and the polite consideration that she gives the Crown prosecutor. When the 5 people from the State Department walked into the court proceeding last year and huddled up with the Crown prosecutor, again, any unbought judge would be like, "What the fuck are you doing in my courtroom? You can't go have a huddle. No." Vanessa Barrister was like, "Tell your friends I said hi." It was just blatant.
And that's not even the real like first instance of it, where you see in the most recent hearings where um the the US prosecution literally said, like, yeah, we don't particularly care if the names of his significant other and children are released or not released. But the judge was adamant upon releasing it. But I think that the hearing coming up on the 24th, actually, because that's the next date. April 24th is the next. What are those hearings called?
Case management.
Case management hearings is the next one coming up, and it was supposed to be specifically about the appeal, I believe, to not have the names of his partner and children released.
No, as a matter of fact, that was supposed to take place today.
Okay.
And it was supposed to go to a different judge, but again, Stella Morris, outed herself and their children in order to regain a shred of power and dignity, which again is fucking gross that it had to come to that.
But the next story here, if we want to jump into this one, is related in a similar way, very similarly to Julian's situation, and it's about Reality Winner. And this is coming from law.com. Do you want to get that one pulled up? Okay. Former NSA contractor Reality Winner has asked a federal judge to commute her sentence for leaking to the media and releasing her from a federal prison where 2 inmates have already been infected with COVID-19. Winner's attorney filed a motion Friday in the Southern District of Georgia asking Chief Justice Randall Hall to order the release of Winner and allow her to serve the remainder of her sentence on home confinement. Whitley, a former U.S. attorney in Atlanta and in Macon, argued that Winner's release is warranted because she is housed in close quarters to FMC Carlson in Fort Worth, Texas, where social distancing is impossible and supplies of hand sanitizer have run out. Whitney's motion to Winner's second attempt to secure her release this year. In February, Allison Grittner, the attorney for Legal Access Texas, filed a petition with the U.S. Justice Department seeking to commute Winner's sentence shortly after President Trump issued a series of high-profile commutations and pardons. Winner has been in custody since her June 2017 arrest, where she pled guilty to a single count of espionage in August 2018, and has served more than 34 months in detention. With federal good time, Winner's release date is still 2 years off. Whitley also cited Winner's history of respiratory illness and immune system compromised by bulimia that makes her particularly vulnerable to this virus. The best chance that Reality has to weather this pandemic is to be released and be permitted to live with her family in rural Texas, Whitney said. Whitney also asked the judge for an immediate hearing, saying that it is only a matter of time before Winner is exposed. So this is something that's not only happening to Julian. This is happening to other whistleblowers. And that's why I'm so glad that Chelsea Manning had been released before all of this got into a full-blown swing. But we also have to keep in mind that Jeremy Hammond is still in prison. That this is something that I have to try to find a little bit more information on. But the fact that he is still in prison during this global pandemic, plandemic, I guess would be the proper term to use here. And they're not letting people out. They're not letting these whistleblowers out. They're not letting immigrants out of these prisons. And it's just something that they're hoping, at least the way that I see it, is they're hoping that these people catch it and die. So that way they don't have their blood on their hands. They don't have to keep fucking with them, literally. And just the simple fact that they're in prison during this time with these illnesses creates a whole nother level of psychological stress upon them. Because when we talked to Billy and Brittany, they talked about how reality is not in a single cell. She's in a pod where she's surrounded by other people. And if one person in that pod gets it, if we believe about how contagious it is, everyone in that pod is going to get it just by the basic fact that they're breathing. Because being in a group of a large number of people in a prison, you have no way to actually get away from all of this.
No, and the Jeremy Hammond Support Committee put out a tweet a couple of weeks ago now it's been, but they had a video call and it was Jeremy. And you could see just walking behind him how close in proximity people are. Jeremy makes a point every time that he can, and he should, to refer to wherever he's being incarcerated as a dump or a pigsty, because it is, and makes allusions to that. If you can, by the way, in that video call that the Jeremy Hammond Support Committee posted, there's a specific request for books, and there are specific books. I don't have them in front of me at the moment, but they are on social media accounts that relate to Jeremy. I'm gonna go to the chat here real quick and see what you guys are up to. No suspect high court judges in Australia 7-0 to Pell. Yeah, we covered the release of is it Bishop or Cardinal Pell? I can't remember off the top of my head, but another high-ranking pedophile priest. They're all over the U.S. There are just absolute monsters being let out of jail. And Julian Assange sits in Belmarsh. Could you please tell us a little bit about Jeremy Hammond? Yeah, Jeremy was one of the people that were involved with the Stratfor hack, which became the Global Intelligence Files that were released through WikiLeaks. It has been a while. So while we're, if you want to know who Jeremy Hammond is, the best way to do that is to read the statement that he wrote, because he was part of the WikiLeaks grand jury. And back in August or September of last year, he was yanked out of his minimum security cell where he was doing, I believe, 8.5 years for the hack, and taken to the same facility that was holding Chelsea Manning. So I'll link it in the chat, but I'll read out the statement right now. Jeremy says, as many of you know, I was just a few months from my scheduled release from federal prison when I was unexpectedly dragged in chains and planes to this raggedy detention center in Alexandria, Virginia. I am outraged that the government is threatening additional jail time if I do not cooperate with their grand jury investigation. Their draconian intimidation tactics could never coerce me into betraying my comrades or my principles. In the spirit of resistance and with great contempt for their system, I am choosing silence over freedom. I am fully prepared for the consequences of my decision, just as I had been each and every time I was faced with similar choices before. Long ago, when I realized that government and capitalism were too hopelessly corrupt and unjust to be reformed through legal or electoral means, I chose to engage in civil disobedience and direct action. I knew then that my actions could land me behind bars, yet I fought on anyway. After a dozen arrests and even a prior federal prison sentence for hacking, I chose once again to use my computer skills to attack the systems of the rich and powerful as part of the anonymous federal case I am doing time for today. When I pled guilty, I took responsibility for my actions and my actions alone. I never agreed to be debriefed or testify in any way, unlike the government's informant, Hector Monsegur, aka Sabu, whose reward was 1 year of probation while I received the maximum sentence allowable by law. It was a painful choice, but 10 years in their dungeons was the price I was willing to pay so I could maintain my integrity. I have never regretted my choices the entire time I've been incarcerated. And having seen and experienced firsthand the abuses inherent injustice of the prison industrial complex, my commitment to revolution and abolition has only become more deeply entrenched. Now, after 7.5 years of paying my debt to society, the government seeks to punish me further with this vindictive, politically motivated legal maneuver to delay my release, knowing full well that I will never cooperate with their witch hunt. I am opposed to all grand juries, but I am opposed to this one in particular because it is part of the government's ongoing war on free speech, journalists, and whistleblowers. I am insulted that those in power claim that I have an obligation that every citizen owes his government to testify. As an anarchist, I am not part of their social contract and do not recognize the legitimacy of their laws and courts. Instead, I believe in a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote I had taped to the wall of my prison cell for years. One has an obligation to disobey unjust laws. It is difficult to view any of this government's laws as just when they are so selectively enforced and when the government turns a blind eye to its own misconduct that is on display every day that Trump is in the White House. In my case, the government, through its informant Sabu, instigated numerous hacks asking me to break into governments and companies all over the world. Nearly a decade later, this misconduct remains ignored. The NSA continues to surveil everyone and launch cyber attacks. Trump and his corrupt cronies continue to hold the world hostage to their megalomaniacal imperialist pigwhims, while simultaneously refusing to comply with subpoenas and inquiries into their own vicious abuses of power. Meanwhile, Chelsea Manning and I are doing hard time in this dump for the crime of refusing to allow our spirits to break after serving our sentences for exposing government and corporate corruption. This absurd hypocrisy and desperate ruthlessness reveals a crumbling legal system, a system that has robbed me of the majority of my adult life, but could never take my humanity. I will continue to do the right thing, no matter how long it takes. I know how to do time, and I will never be intimidated by their threats, ever. I refuse. That's who Jeremy Hammond is.
And that's something that 2 weeks before the release of Chelsea, before the ending of the WikiLeaks grand jury, the 10-year-long grand jury, and before Jeremy was returned to the lesser security prison and Chelsea was set free, we actually got, because of you guys in the audience, we got to go and hold a protest outside of their prison, and we got to read this statement for all of their prison guards and those in the guard house and those guards that were watching, and hopefully the other inmates to hear. As it stands right now, with this current situation and with everything else going on in the world, chances are we're probably not going to be able to put on the same kind of protest that we did during the first week of the hearing. But there are tons of people out there, if you have the ability to donate, that need help right now. There's Elizabeth Mueller, there is Jason Burmis, Susie Dawson, and that's just 3 of them. And I'm sure there's so many others that are going around that you know about for GoFundMes, like David McBride's and things like that. So if you have the ability to, please donate to them, because they're the people that are fighting. Susie, Elizabeth, and David most specifically, and Jason as a person who is trying his best to proliferate the truth about this fucking crazy world that we live in. So I'll get some links together and put them on our websites for GoFundMe's that are out there right now to support whistleblowers and journalists. Is there anyone else that you could think of, or any of the people I named that you want to talk a little bit more about, Steve?
I mean, I have a Patreon, but Liz Mueller in particular is just getting hammered right now. Her bank account's getting fucked with. Her workplace is compromised. So I would, and I have, and I should again, because it's been a little bit, donate to that GoFundMe. I think we can. Do you want me to pull it up here real quick?
Yeah, you can.
Because I can do that. While I do that, you should talk so it doesn't look like I'm just sitting here typing like a jackass with no sound.
Nope. That's the plan. But even if you can't donate, if you have the ability to just share their links around social media right now, it does make a big difference. Because just because you necessarily don't have the means to put that out there, doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. And just spreading the word about these people makes such a huge difference, because even if you just scratch the surface of their stories, in the case of David McBride, Susie Dawson, and Elizabeth, for what they've gone through, these people are heroes. These are people that have been fighting back against the system, and the system recognizes them as someone that they need to fight back against. So if you could donate to these people, donate to more if you know of other ones. Please share other GoFundMe's with us. Our Twitter DMs are open for anyone to send us a message. If you find other whistleblowers and journalists that have been targeted or are trying to proliferate truth, and again, I will do my best to get these all kind of collated and put on our website so it's in one more specific place that everybody can find. Cool. Our next piece here is just because this person's a bitch, and I use that term in the most respectful way because there's so many other words that I could use to describe her. Hannah Jane Parkinson is someone who deserves the absolute onslaught of every keyboard warrior that exists in support of Julian right now. Because following the release of the information that the judge had tried to extort out of Julian's legal team, she pulls out with, "Excuse me while I vomit for the foreseeable future," in regards to Julian fathering 2 children while inside the embassy.
Oh, and she blocked Christine Assange. She blocked Julian's mom because Julian's mom came into the thread with some facts. Like, she wasn't even mean. She was perfectly polite and was like, "Here's what's wrong about this." And she blocked a grandmother because she's got a brittle spirit. All right? Like, that's someone with a very brittle spirit. So yeah, look, I'm not telling you to go after her, but you can surely drop by and mock her. You can put her on blast for being the horrible excuse for a human being that she is.
And while you're passing through there, please like and retweet the comment that Miss Assange put on there. And I just want to read it out real quick for everybody, because it wasn't even inherently really rude, right? She said, "My son is suffering intensely and may die from a brutal political prosecution and slow motion murder. For the courageous multi-award winning journalism revealing the evidence of U.S. war crimes." And that's the best you come up with the birth of this beautiful and much loved children. And that got Miss Assange blocked by this person. Just that.
Because she got a brittle spirit. Let's be honest, man. Yeah. That is a weak ass individual who is ashamed of themselves, who knows that they revel in the suffering of another human being,
and of another journalist, nonetheless.
That like button and filling her up with dopamine, it's okay. But as soon as someone with an accurate viewpoint, who in this case is Julian Assange's mother, walks in and is like, ooh, hey, here's what's happening, and you're happy about this. You know, like that's somebody's mama going, I'm very disappointed in you. Like, that's just bad, dude. She's got a brittle spirit, so she throws a block.
And I'm assuming that this is someone at the Guardian that's never going to break stories about war crimes or reveal classified information. And so she puts herself somehow, for some reason, in a class completely different than Julian. And this is something you see repeated throughout the mainstream media, where Julian regarded his sources as, I would assume, like heroes and truth tellers, where most of these people in these ivory towers see their sources as like raggedy dogs. So I think it says a lot about someone when they can shit on another journalist because they're a better journalist than them, and then revel in the fact that they're being slowly murdered, because that's what this is. It's literally just clickbait trying to boost her profile and show the intelligence community whose side she's on. Because at this point in time, the intelligence community, national security state, global capitalists, deep state, whatever acronym or name you want to give these people, they are the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. And I think, do we have that Zoom privacy thing up?
Oh, I'm gonna have to go find that. It's behind a paywall. I didn't want to check until we were about ready to go, because I'm not sure how many free.
Because I have it up here for free if you want me to pull it up. They're giving me this one.
Okay, then yeah, go for it.
Cool. Let me screen share this up real quick.
Yeah, because we do talk a lot about encryption and why you need to be using it. We've been screaming about the Earn It or Earn IT Act, which is going to more or less kill end-to-end encryption for private citizens unless they are following some obscure set of good boy rules. So let's go through this a little bit, because Zoom kind of sucks, and we're only using it tonight because we couldn't connect with our guest through the open source encrypted software program we've been using, which is Jitsi. So in the New York Times, Brian Shin writes, ever since many of us started working from home in the coronavirus pandemic, I've been invited to countless gatherings taking place on Zoom, the video conferencing app. Virtual happy hours, work meetings, dinners, you name it. I've been a no-show, and it's not just because my hair has grown embarrassingly long. It's because I have a fundamental problem with Zoom. Let me first say that I understand why Zoom has been so popular in the pandemic. The company designed its app to be free and extremely easy to use. In tech lingo, we call it frictionless. Even our friends and relatives with zero technical know-how can join a Zoom meeting just by clicking a link. Then voila, you are looking at a screen with familiar faces and can begin chatting right away. At least 200 million of us, just desperate to see people outside our homes, now use Zoom, up from 10 million a few months ago. Many of us use it for free, though Zoom also has a paid product. For lots of us, it's a lifeline to see and converse with a friend or relative. But for the last year, I've been wary of the app. Zoom has had multiple privacy snafus in that period, which have come up so frequently that they have become a game of whack-a-mole. The missteps include a weakness that would have allowed malware to attach to Zoom and hijack our web cameras. The issues with basic security practice culminated with Zoom bombing, in which trolls crashed people's video meetings and bombarded them with inappropriate material like pornography.
And this is something that we witness like live on this channel when I was assisting Sydney with live streaming their anniversary meeting, where people dropped in and just started streaming porn into the Zoom meeting. It's still not fixed, I guess would be the way to put it out there.
Right? In a blog post last week, Zoom's chief executive, Eric Yuan, apologized for all the mistakes and said the recent problems had been largely addressed. The company promised to focus on fixing its privacy and security issues over the coming months. Let's scroll down a little bit. If there's something deja vu about all this, you aren't wrong. It's because we find ourselves dealing with the same situation over and over again, focusing on the convenience of easy-to-use tech products over the issues like data security and privacy. We went through this not so long ago with Ring, the doorbell camera, another product with a catchy name. Ring, which is owned by Amazon, became popular during another crummy situation, an increase in petty crime over package thefts. It was also easy to install, but despite glowing customer reviews, Ring became mired in privacy scandals, including one that involved hackers hijacking the Ring cameras of multiple families. The lesson is one we need to learn and relearn. When a company fails to protect our privacy, where'd that go? We shouldn't just continue to use its product and tell the people we care about to use it, just because it works well and is simple to use. Once we lose our privacy, we rarely get it back again. And this doesn't even touch on what we've learned about Zoom, where everything on all of your open tabs, all of that information, your browser history gets sent to goddamn Facebook. We know that from a couple of different outlets. I mean, I'm basically over the article. I think we've got.
Yeah, I'll drop the link in chat and we can stop it there. I would like to touch briefly, even if we don't pull it up, because it's something that, like, I've personally been trying to raise the alarm about, and you've been raising the alarm about forever. So we won't really dive into the article. I'll just throw the link into chat for everyone as we're getting ready to wrap up here for the evening. But the recently became known name Thomas Massie of the House of Representatives, a Republican from Kentucky, I believe, if I remember properly. Don't quote me on where he's from. Has basically come out and said that we are going to have a catastrophic collapse of our meat and dairy infrastructure systems, as well as our grown produce infrastructure system. There's a really good audio if you follow it into the iHeartRadio link. Like if you go into the Pundit article and then onto Twitter and then follow that link onto iHeartRadio. We can't play it live here because it's like a guaranteed copyright strike against us, and that's something that we're not trying to get right now.
iHeartRadio is owned by Clear Channel Communications, and they are straight the fuck up Nazis. So yeah, like it embarrasses me to have to ask you to go listen to something put out on that platform. But he touches on some key issues that we need to be thinking about.
And rather than giving these guys the clicks and everything right now here on the vigil itself, and I have no hope of him joining us, but we have contacted Massey's office on multiple occasions asking him if he would like to come on the show to talk about the Earn It Act, to talk about what he's calling the Prime Act, which would be something to literally deregulate the food market right now to allow farmers to have more direct-to-sale processing, to where they don't have to sell 100 cows to one person or to one corporation. They could just sell specific flanks of meat. And something that he talks about most specifically is right now we're seeing the mass dumping of milk, right? Where the largest purchaser of milks were schools, and those are all closed down. Restaurants, those are all closed down. So they're literally, and you can go on any social media and just look up the milk that's being dumped right now. And so the market is collapsing around the dairy industry. I think food should be a public utility. But nonetheless, this is going to lead to those cows being sold for meat. We have the largest meat packers in the United States filing for bankruptcy or not having employees that are readily available to work. So those industries are collapsing. So while bread lines are forming, while charities are running out of food to hand out to people during the pandemic, we're going to start seeing mass cattle euthanization because there's nothing else to do with them, because there's no employees at these slaughterhouses to slaughter them. There's no employees on the farms to actually get the food out of the ground. And then even if they did, there's no one inherently to purchase it, even though there are millions of hungry people across this country, and quite frankly, probably at least a billion around the world right now. So I just think that that's super important to point out, and it kind of touches me directly because it's something that I contacted over 120 different local representatives for city councils, mayors, things like that, saying, hey, we have a coming food crisis. I know you're busy, but can we address this as a city while the state and federal government just run around and screaming with their hair on fire? So that's kind of where I want to leave that. Do you want to talk a little bit about food security? And because we've gone into it a billion times, but I always think it's worth bringing up to try to inspire some people right now.
Just to say that making your community as food secure as possible is a revolutionary act at this point. And I understand that there are people that live in urban areas that find it more difficult to do that, but that's where you need to get together with your neighbors and figure out rooftop gardens, figure out windowsill gardens, and figure out courtyard gardens. If you need help planning those, I'm on Twitter at Slow News Day Show. My DMs be open. I will help you with that. Yeah, but that's a conversation for another day, and I believe that we need to wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. You can find us as a show on Twitter at action_4 Assange. I would like to thank Jose for the personal risk that he's taken for joining us this evening, and for everybody that has stuck around with us here throughout this whole thing.
My name's Steve Poikin, and I host a show called Slow News Day that you can find by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into the search bar on YouTube. I'm also on Periscope and DLive, and a couple other platforms if we can figure them out. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to our own mean panda, Kimber, and also Craig Pasta Jardula. It is his birthday as well. I texted him earlier. He was celebrating as best as one can on lockdown. Much love to those guys. Thank you to Jose, to Andrew here, and Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos. Thank you all for being a part of this with this. We fucking love you guys. Until Thursday, when we will be joined by Tim Canova and Ian Schlackman. Good luck to us all.